Buona tarde, buenas tardes, good afternoon. It's a delight to welcome you all back to the afternoon panel, which is in many ways the sibling or the cousin panel to what we had in the morning. Now we will focus on practices for equitable research partnerships and look at scholar engagement in activism. Our aims for this session are to consider how best to conduct and leverage research in support of marginalized language communities, speakers, and learners. And we'll be discussing approaches to research partnerships, as well as how scholars can engage in various forms of activism and support. And in this panel, we aim to bring in perspectives from different geographical, global contexts, as well as different disciplines and different positionalities. We have, of course, linguistics, but also education, anthropology and cultural studies. And we have scholars who are outsiders in the context they work in, as well as insiders in the contexts that they work in. Our plan for today is to start with each of our invited speakers sharing some of their personal experiences and strategies in the area of research partnerships. And I will let them each introduce themselves as they come up. But we have a really, really wonderful group of speakers today. My name is Hallie de Korn. I work at the University of Oslo, and it's I also want to thank LinguaPax and all of the organizers for making this event possible and for inviting me to organize and be part of this panel. So after brief individual presentations, we'll then bring all the panelists up here and open for your questions and discussion. So if you have a question for an individual presentation, please note it down, and then we'll be discussing it afterwards. Then we'll have a little break. We have to keep you awake and moving now in the afternoon. When we come back from the break, we will be talking about guidelines for research that can support minoritized language communities. And we'll look at some frameworks that exist that we're using in the Fosterlang project and discuss some of the benefits and some of the shortcomings of these frameworks and how they can be improved. And we will then invite you to join small group discussions where you can give your insight and your expertise on these topics based on your experiences and your positionality. I will explain more about these small groups and these discussions when we get to that point. But just so you know, this panel will be a little more, you'll be getting up and down a few times in the next few hours, basically. Before we launch into sharing the individual experiences and strategies, it's important to note that this dialogue we're having today is part of a long-running discussion on how to engage in language research in ethical and meaningful ways. I'm sure many people are familiar with Cameron et al.'s framing of research on, for, and with a community. Which has then been expanded by Eva Czechowska-Higgins to talk about research by a community. The Cameron et al. Framing tends to assume that researchers are outside the community. So the with is collaborative, but still outside, whereas the by, of course, recognizes that, oh, okay, that wasn't supposed to happen. The by recognizes that researchers can, of course, be members of the communities that they are working with. Okay, nope, now it's not advancing. Okay, and many scholars have examined these dynamics. For example, Wesley Leonard and Erin Haynes have talked about how collaboration should consider both the needs and the expertise of researchers as well as community members, that often there's an imbalance in whose needs and whose expertise are present, but that ideally we want to bring them in a more equal way. And Vanessa Anthony-Stevens has worked carefully on the role of outsider collaborators and how they or we can build alliances for, in this case, Indigenous educational sovereignty, but I would argue any kind of research by, on the one hand, stepping up, using the privilege of being a non-minoritized person to try to contest and shed light on inequalities, but also very importantly, stepping aside, listening, learning, and ceding space to experts with other positionalities. So this is a broad aim that is well established in language studies, but we know that there are also many institutional and ideological barriers to achieving these kinds of truly equitable collaborations and partnerships. In research, we are often expected to have individualized outcomes that are for restricted or specialized audiences. They should be quantifiable. They should also be final and authoritative. There's a clear endpoint to the project. There's a date when the book is published. There is the final result. Whereas when we're engaged in pursuing social outcomes, as was discussed very insightfully this morning, the broader networks of social engagement and community engagement are always part of these processes. The work needs to be accessible. It's not always quantifiable, and it is always ongoing and subject to revisions. You're basically never done with language reclamation work. Another challenge that is important to bear in mind is the different language paradigms or language ontologies or ways of thinking about language that are present in language reclamation work. So from the discipline of linguistics, we have the view of language as an object or a structure and a focus on often creating dictionaries and grammars. Within educational sciences, as well as international development studies, there has been a focus on language as a tool for educational attainment and work on trying to improve multilingual programs and pedagogies, such as this example from Save the Children, but also other NGOs have worked on so-called mother tongue-based multilingual education in different parts of the world. And within Indigenous education, Indigenous studies, but also often linguistic anthropology, we have a focus on language as a form of relationality and a form of identity, and work on community and land-based education, as well as socialization practices and the arts, and projects such as this picture that you can't quite see of a community workshop initiative focusing on Isthmus Zapotec or Dijasa environmental knowledge for children. And another paradigm that we heard quite a bit about last night in the opening panel is that of language as a human right for self-determination and community sovereignty, and thus a focus on policies, systems, and structures. But these are, of course, not exhaustive ways of thinking about language, not exhaustive ways of researching language. There are many different paradigms that we might encounter that we might find useful when we're engaging in this kind of work. And because of this, I have argued that it's important to approach language activism as a scholar, but also from other social positions in a constructivist way. And what I mean by that is acknowledging the fact that language has many meanings, that there are different paradigms of language and different ways of approaching it. It's also important, I believe, to note that positive social change has many meanings. So different members of one community may have different priorities or imaginaries of what kind of change they want to pursue. And ways of pursuing positive change are multiple. There's different theories of action, different strategies about how to try to bring change about. So because of this, we need a repertoire of activism strategies depending on our context and our positionality in order to engage as effectively as possible. And fortunately, today we are now going to hear about some different strategies, some different experiences from scholars working within different disciplines and in different parts of the world. So without further ado, then we'll move into the individual presentations. The panel members at the moment are sitting down here so they can see each other. But then when the individual presentations are finished, then we'll all come up here and have a discussion. So I would like to invite Joseph Crew from Newcastle University, who you also got to hear a bit from this morning, to take the stage, and then we'll shift to the first presentation, please.
Thank you. It's me again. Last one in the previous session and first one now. What I'm going to do in this 10 minutes is to go a little bit in more depth on a project that I've been involved with in the last couple of years. I did my work in Mexico, mainly in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, with speakers of Yucatec Spanish. But, in the last couple of years, I've been working along with Jose Antonio in the revitalization of Náhuatl of the Sierra Norte de Puebla. I don't know anything about Náhuatl, but Jose Antonio does, as well as Justina here. They are really, renowned experts on Náhuatl languages. Okay, but what I'm going to present is actually one book that we have developed lately, and to put in context the kind of work that we do. Okay, sorry. So a little bit of a little bit of I was trying that. A little bit of the work that I've been involved with LinguaPax. I've been working with LinguaPax actually since the year 2000. So before going to academia. So for me, joining academia was quite late. I come from NGO work rather than academia. And what I did with Felix Martí, who was mentioned yesterday, was some kind of consultation missions in some Latin American countries, for example, in Paraguay, at the time in Mexico. And that was a kind of almost like the golden age, of legislation of drafting legislation for the recognition of indigenous languages in many Latin American countries. In Mexico, Paraguay, Colombia, all those countries had developed laws of language rights at the time. But what I'm going to do today is to, again, say something about the revitalization, maintenance, linguistic, and cultural development project. Now, it is grassroots collaborative project. It unites researchers, activists, practitioners, using the arts for language revitalization. So our approach, and again, repeating a little bit of what we said this morning, so I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but it's an intercultural approach. It's practice and practitioner oriented. And the methodology relies on the active engagement of the participants across all the stages of the production process of the materials that we produce, from collection, transcription, illustration, production, and dissemination. The materials are grounded in indigenous verbal art, how important orality is. We have emphasized that already. We have developed many production in using readers and tongue twisters and the local epistemologists, indigenous epistemologists, designed by children, youth, and adults. Many indigenous languages of Mexico, more than 70 books already in many different languages, and other examples that are presented this morning. Now, what we've been doing in the last couple of years, we've been working with Tosepan Tititanisque, which is a union of cooperative. This is it's really a unique project in Mexico, and I would say Latin America. We're talking here about a union of cooperatives, not one cooperative, but 9 cooperatives, indigenous grassroots cooperatives. They're going to be 50 years old, next year, located in northeastern Sierra of Puebla. Nearly, around 35,000 families. That's a lot of people who have organized themselves from the grassroots to build those 9 cooperatives. They have their own bank, where they can borrow money, for different projects. They have their own radio station. So it's really, as I was saying, a unique experience. Women constitute more than 60% of Tosepan's membership. and they are very active. We're working with Leticia Vasquez. That's our, local person there who help us develop these materials. These indigenous cooperative, they have developed what they call Códice Masewal, a Masewal Codex. It's similar to what our colleagues from Colombia were presenting with this idea of a life plan. They are planning for the next 40, 50 years. It's a long vision plan of what they want to achieve, in the upcoming, 30 or 40 years. Okay. And of course, language is one pillar. Language and identity, language revitalization is one pillar within, a bigger endeavor of self-determination, territorial rights, biodiversity, keeping biodiversity knowledge, etc. And it is, there is one central concept, which is Yegnemilis, which is also found in many indigenous communities in Latin America, Suma Kausai, among the Quechua. Jacqueline was talking also about like good life, the good living in harmony with the environment. Okay, and one of the main strategic lines does include a bilingual document in Nahuatl and Spanish. We'll say more about that later. We've been working with the local school, about 30 kids. Multi-grade all together, and now what is quite vital in that particular environment, which is really, against the odds of what schooling is in Mexico, even intercultural bilingual education, which is basically, Castilianizing education, generally speaking, in Mexico. It is a grassroots educational experience. And it does position Nahuatl as a medium of instruction. So we've seen the teachers using Nahuatl with the kids. Yeah, and this is the book that we've been developing lately. I'll pass it around. And some of the challenges. Now a little bit closing and kind of I want to highlight the takeaways, and I'm more than happy, of course, to discuss more of the project, or if you want to know more about Tosepan. One of the challenges, I mean, not surprising, how to secure funding. These are high quality materials. So, I got like 10,000 pounds from my university, which is almost like a miracle, getting money and funding from UK universities. I'm sure Mel also knows here. Building alliances, with local people takes time. And we think, it's really thinking long term. You need to build those relationships, not through time. And now everything seems to be, I want it now. Everything has to be now. Difficult to assess the impact. That's one of the things. I was trying to get more money from my university. And of course, the first thing they said is, what is the impact, impact of your work? We may give you some impact. And I'm like, woof, it's not easy. It's not quantifiable. It's not measurable in terms of, we have 3 more kids who are using more often than, before we went there, and that there are more using more often the indigenous language. It doesn't work like that. These are, single interventions, because something I didn't say, but it's really important. We not only produce the materials, what we do is organize workshops with the community and with local, partners who actually recreate the content, of the booklet in the local place. So we get together people, children, adults, grandparents, to talk about the riddles, the tongue twisters, or the story of the opossum here, which is an interesting one. Also, for those of you who are more, linguists, in terms of, descriptive linguists, if you like, or also social linguists, but the issue of literacy, the issue of standardization, the issue of purism, and the issue of linguistic variation. Now, what is not one language? It's actually many languages. It's more like a language family. All those issues are what I call, and I'm like, I quite like that phrase. They may have paralyzing effects on language revitalization. They are common across communities. What we speak is mixed with Spanish. We need to standardize the language, etc., etc. So this is actually paralyzing, the linguistic revitalization efforts. Huh? So that's something to negotiate, actually. Yeah? For example, this book is in the variety of the northern eastern Sierra of Puebla. It's not other kind of standard Nahuatl, it's their Nahuatl. So people can appropriate this book as, their own variety of Nahuatl. And then, of course, the use of digital technology. Eddie Avila, this morning, you kind of pointed out a few things that are, important. And yeah, the use of augmented reality has, a lot of potential for orality, for example, but also using phones in the classroom, relying too much on technology is not a silver bullet, etc. So we can discuss that later. Some successes, I'll go quickly through this, but it's been active for 20 years, hundreds of thousands of copies of many of the books we have published. We do have anecdotal evidence. These three people here, Flor Canché, Jasmine, and Data, were leading workshops 15 years ago with us in the Yucatan Peninsula. And they have become like really pillars of really engaged and committed activists for language revitalization in the Yucatan Peninsula, which is, as I was saying, the area that I know best. And borrowing from you don't see it here, but borrowing from Halley, actually, the last point, what it says is that these are incremental grains of sand, if you like, granitos de arena. Of course, language revitalization is a kind of difficult, with many variables in place. But we think that our work, it does, it's a grain of sand, and that works towards language revitalization. And now the last one, and I'm finishing with this, is these are the takeaways. But again, Halley was already pointing out, so as Thomas told me yesterday, einmal is keinmal in German, for those of you who know German. So it's good to, to drum home these key points. We try to work with and for in the sense of for the benefit of communities, and not in a paternalistic way, but for the benefit of the communities, rather than on speakers, on the languages as detached objects. We do listen to the community needs, so we really negotiate the kind of materials that we produce. And and it has to be achievable goals with the money we have. We have £10,000. What we can do is this, which is quite a lot, I think, with £10,000, and also thinking of the ways in which, bringing, this discussion into the ethics for later. I think we need to use also and engage with local ways of doing. Like, for example, Mano Vuelta. And Mano Vuelta is, we help each other. It's reciprocity, which is really ingrained in the way that indigenous peoples in this part of Mexico and other parts of the world work. And that's it. Thank you. And I'll pass around the booklets if you want to see them. But this is not the book we're actually on, but it's being printed up.
Should I do it? No. It's the, yeah. Super. And I do. Which one? The arrow?
Yes.
Okay. Giadaíomh Chairde is Mel Ingman. Is lector me san Oscail na Banriana, email first agus ha me ag folium Gaeilge. So my name is Mel Ingman. I'm a lecturer at Queen's University, Belfast, and I'm a learner of Irish. And I'll talk more about the learning part in this presentation.
but I'm grateful to Haley and Yusina and Monica and organizers of this event for including me. I am having a great time. And I'm going to talk about the importance of relationships in this presentation. And I'm going to talk about two different communities that I've worked with, the Ojibwe language community in what is the Great Lakes region of what's now known as the United States, and then Irish language communities in the north of Ireland. Okay, so there's value in being able to place a person, but I'll be quick about this. So I was born and raised in the Great Lakes region of what is now the US. My family are white, monolingual, English-speaking settlers, meaning they're descended from European migrants to that continent. And so this emplacement makes me an outsider to Indigenous language communities in the places where I do research and learn language. So I'm a researcher learner and an outsider to the language communities with which I work. And this makes relationships very critical to doing ethical research. So we've been prompted to discuss these three questions, and I think it's important for me to note how relationality has informed my involvement in language reclamation research. Relationships are the most important thing, and we've already seen that from so many of the presentations, and I think we're going to see more of it for the rest of the conference. And I'm talking about relationships with humans. I'm also talking about relationships with other living beings, with land and water, with the languages of the community and their attendant knowledges, and with self. And so when I say that I'm learning the language that I am researching with, I don't mean that I'm only trying to master lexical and grammatical forms, though yes, that is a part of it because I'm trying to learn how to do things, how to do languaging things. But I'm also learning how to relate in and with a language that is embedded in specific life ways and with specific places. So in the cases that I'm going to share with you today, it's no coincidence that these languages are indigenous to the places where I have made my home and raised my babies. Okay, so although they are an ocean apart, I have found some deep resonances, and I'm still kind of surprised to see these resonances between the reclamation of Ojibwe in the Great Lakes region of North America, or Turtle Island, and the reclamation of Gaeilge in Ireland. So both languages were deeply rooted in place long before colonial invasion came through. The Ojibwe and Irish language communities both experienced centuries of violence, forced removal, policies of assimilation, massive changes to the natural environments that they lived in. And given the erasure of entire people that settler colonialism necessitates, it is really remarkable how some Ojibwe people have been able to hold on to their language and their life ways. And amongst the many who had the language taken from them, there is a tremendous desire for the language. And this is a desire that cuts across urban and rural communities, and it is almost always deeply entangled with land. It's a bit of a different story with regard to language in Ireland, as the island is divided. There are 26 counties in the south, which comprise what's now the modern nation state of the Republic of Ireland. And then there are 6 counties in the north, which are seen as part of the modern nation state, the United Kingdom. So Gaeilge, or Irish language, is an official language in the Republic along with English, and it has been since that formation of the modern nation state in the early 1900s. But it's been a much more difficult road in the north. And I would point out that just also having parity with English as having official status in policy does not mean that the language has parity in practice. So in the north, where I live, there is a growing desire amongst many, though not all, for more Irish language in public and private life. Though because of its politicization during the Troubles, this is much easier said than done. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about Ojibwe. So in 2013, I met Dr. Mary Hermes. She is the woman on the right that you see with the glasses. And I began learning Ojibwe from her because she was the teacher. She was a professor at the University of Minnesota, and she also ran a small nonprofit organization called Grassroots Indigenous Multimedia. And right away, she told me that once you start to know even a little bit of language, you will be expected to share that knowledge. And she was right. So while I continued my PhD and my Ojibwe language learning, I was also working alongside Fong, she goes by Fong, and another Ojibwe speaker, Jordan, who, oh, it's upside down. The formatting got funny, but the upside down one is Jordan, and she is an excellent Ojibwe speaker. We created materials and developed teacher trainings for early years educators at White Earth and Red Lake reservations. And let's see, and as I learned the language of this place that grew me, we also created situational, unscripted movies with first speaker elders that featured the everyday language of conversation. We later made these into teaching materials. We held family language camps. That was really hard. We developed teacher trainings for Ojibwe immersion teachers, but also for English language teachers who had students who were not Indigenous. We created bilingual books that were illustrated by Ojibwe artists and authors. And then we also did some land-based research. So this research with elders and with bilingual youth really transformed my understanding of what is possible in terms of human relationships with land and the more than human world. We collected audio and visual data of young people and elders walking through familiar forest land. And in analyzing that data, I really saw how Ojibwe languaging structured relations between humans and other beings in nature. Sometimes this was verbal code, but more often it was just these embodied interactional moves that I think traditional language documentation and description techniques might only note as like timed silences. There was really something special and relational happening there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Irish. So in 2019, I took a job at Queen's University Belfast. I don't have any family there. It was quite a jump. I moved to Ireland with my family and I was shocked by how alienated I felt in the new environment. Winters are too warm, the summers are too cool, there aren't enough trees, the sky there is really low. So to overcome this alienation, I did the only thing I really knew to do, which is enroll in Irish language classes. And I was still in the midst of several Ojibwe research projects, so Irish language research was not on my mind. I just wanted to try to get to know the place better. Then in the early days of the pandemic, an Irish-speaking friend was expressing some frustration at the local education authority because they had been providing free translations of school materials from English into a number of home languages to support the bilingual students who were now, being homeschooled during the pandemic. But they did not extend this offer of translation to students in Irish medium education. So we did some research to better understand how families with varying levels of Irish do languaging in the home together. And so we met with parents whose kids were in Irish medium education. We outfitted families with baking supplies and head-mounted cameras and made some Irish language baking videos for them to follow along with. There's my friend Orla holding the bag of flour for her baking video that she made. And it was all in Irish. So that they could follow along to the baking video and make the bread at home together. Preparing food for your family as a family was kind of the idea behind it. And we had them film themselves while they were doing it so we could see the languaging that comes into play, because for many young people who are in Irish medium education, their parents are English dominant. Right, so I've also been working on more land-based research in Ireland to better understand the role of language in building and sustaining human relationships with the natural world. So I've taken people on foraging walks all over Belfast, and depending on the forager, a walk might be in English or Gaeilge or bilingual, and anyone is invited. And this includes international students or long-term migrants or newly arrived migrants. And I think it's really important how this work is showing how focusing attention on Irish land, we're not even looking at language specifically, we're looking at Irish land, and that has the effect of bringing the language along with it. Like we can't escape the language when we talk about the land. Right, so challenges. My outsider status presents plenty of challenges. I know that I'll never have all the context that an Irish person might have. The political complexities of post-conflict life in the North are never simple or straightforward because sectarian hostilities can still play out in language. Also, as many of you have experienced, funding can be a challenge, particularly in terms of balancing a funder's metrics around impact versus a community-based project's focus on the particular. And the greatest challenge is always when we lose people. So this last year has been especially hard. My brilliant friend, Jordan, the upside down one, passed away in the fall. We've also lost a young person who's been incredibly active in the Ojibwe reclamation movement, even as a child and teenager. And we lost a legend of an elder named Pug in the last couple months. And then just a couple of months ago, I also learned of the passing of an Irish mother who was a staunch supporter of Irish language and a beloved community member. So these are big losses. I know they happen, but it's a big loss every time. Okay, so on to the successes. So I experience feelings of success when our projects create conditions for more language use and more human connection. So this community action and research has been successful so far at supporting families to use and learn language together. Intergenerational transmission is often now parents who are learning from their kids. So it's not always carer to child, but it's often in these immersion settings, child to parent. Love seeing it. The land language connection, I think, is also important here because these conditions for more Indigenous language use are now being seen as inclusive of biodiverse natural environments. So just a few weeks ago, I was supporting climate activists with making language-based arguments to stop mining in the Sperrins, which is a very beautiful place in Ireland. I don't know that they were successful, but just to see that there is an interest in connecting language and land as a way of protecting the environment is encouraging. And this work has also been successful in establishing new relationships across communities. So on multiple occasions, I've been able to facilitate introductions between Ojibwe friends and Irish friends and colleagues, bringing people from the United States over to Ireland to meet Irish language activists. And the spark of recognition as they meet one another and share experiences is really beautiful. I often feel like sometimes when they meet, I don't need to be there anymore. It's like I'm not there. They've just seen each other and it's really lovely. And also just to say that given the events of last week in which global majority people in Belfast experienced racist violence, I would note here the tremendous mobilization of solidarity that I witnessed with a very significant contingent of support coming from the Irish language community. It was truly incredible. This is just a tweet on the bottom from Glorna Mona. I don't think you can see it, but Glorna Mona is one of many Irish language organizations in Belfast, and they opened their doors and stepped up in ways that I don't think anybody would have expected from any organization under normal circumstances. Okay, I made this last slide on advice because that was the prompt, but I feel deeply uncomfortable giving advice about how to do work with Indigenous and minority language communities. I have made and will continue to make many, many mistakes. So I'll just keep it very general here, and I'm happy to take any questions you have. Thank you. Okay, don't worry. Thank you so much. Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this conference. I'll just turn on my timer, so I'm sorry, I'm not writing anything. So I would like to say thank you to Hallie de Korn for having me in this panel. Thank you to other panelists. I'm looking forward to our discussion. Thank you very much to LinguaPax International for organizing this event. Thank you to Justyna for having me here as well. I'm glad to see you here, and I'll start with my presentation. Here I would like to share some experiences that I collected when applying, for me, a new research methodology of language portraits when working with 3 different communities in Thailand: Daraang, Karen, and Malabri communities. Each of these communities has a different background. Daraang community members are refugees or the 2nd generation of refugees from Myanmar. A Karen community has been indigenous to Thailand for hundreds of years, and a Malabri community is often exoticized with the words the most mysterious, enigmatic community in Southeast Asia, which I of course don't agree with, but it is exoticized, it is romanticized in Thailand. It's a very small community, and I'm going to talk about this community later. I would like to change the slide, but I encounter some trouble. Maybe with the mouse, yes? Yeah. Yes, but I did it, but yes. Okay, I'm a historical linguist. My PhD was in Mongolian language, and so this photo represents me with the Mongolian president that I enjoyed this meeting a lot. I'm sorry, but I have okay. I also work with languages of Thailand, as I've mentioned, and I also am interested in computational linguistics. I'm sorry. Those of you who are here and already know me probably recognize this slide. I always take the opportunity to say a few words about the language of the region where I come from. I come from Podlachia, and my family members, my friends, myself also, we cultivate the knowledge of Podlachian language. It's an Eastern Slavic language. It's a minoritized language. It's a contested language. And last year at the University of Warsaw, together with Justyna and Tomasz, we also had the pleasure to promote this language in a workshop. It was exactly 1 year ago. But now I would like to move to the core of my presentation. My presentation is based on the results of the project that I have just finished in November last year. It was conducted with the Mahidol University in Thailand with Professor Sumitra Suraradeccha. The results that I'm presenting are based on 6 different fieldwork research stays in Thailand between 2023 and March 2026. And at this time, I had the pleasure to interact with various communities, but here I'm concentrating on 3 of them, on Daraang, Karen, and Malabri. In our research, we applied several different methodologies, I'm sure known to you. And for me, the language portraits methodology was something new. I introduced it in the final phase of my research, and I'm going to share some details about it soon. I've been learning Thai for around 3 years now, and now I'm able to conduct interviews. But before that, I based my research also on heavy and solid collaboration with several interpreters. I think sometimes they are underrepresented in research outputs, so here I wanted to give them the space. These persons come from various communities, from Karen, community Daraang, Uraklawoi, also Lahu, and the person at the very beginning, Professor Sumitra Suraradeccha, is my collaborator. So here I would like to move to the topic of multilingualism in Thailand. Thailand is a very multilingual country. There are several language families represented in this country, and here I'm focusing mainly on highland communities. Or traditionally in museums we can read about 9 different communities, but in fact there are far more.
for some reasons, in the 70s, one of the military divisions has coined the term 9 highland communities, and this is how this is the framework in which these communities are represented in many museums in Thailand. But as you can see, the grayed out fields represent also other communities. I'm talking about two of them, Malabri and Daraang as well. So for those who are not familiar with the language portraits methodology, I would like to share some information. So these language portraits, they constitute a methodology of exploring individuals' multilingual identities. And the core activity in this methodology is to present one's language biography through the means of drawing, selection of colors, and also saturation of colors on the drawing. Students are asked to color a silhouette which represents them according to their language repertoire and that they have. And then afterwards, the participants are asked about their motivations, why they chose this particular colors, why did they place them at a particular part of their body. And here, when it comes to our research, we conducted altogether 40 different sessions. I mean, we conducted less sessions, but with 40 individual speakers. We decided to focus only on adults. So it was also a different setting to ask adult people to take color pencils and draw something. It also probably relaxed them, but also surprised at the very beginning. And here I wanted to share some maybe methodological difficulties that I had that I didn't foresee at the beginning. I realized that in some communities, elderly persons, they are not used to hold a pencil or a pen. And that made me realize that I should have rethought my research design. And also, as you will see on the later slides, there is a requirement to write the names of the languages, and some persons, of course, not necessarily were literate. So we had to readjust our research design for obvious reasons, and I felt really bad after not noticing that earlier. But I think this is where we can share the experiences, and this is fine. So Daraang community, as I mentioned, is a community originally from Myanmar. And the first generation started coming to Thailand in 1982, 1984. They are called Palong by Thai and Shan people, but they prefer to be called Daraang. Here I would like to share a picture from our two sessions. So here you have the language portrait on the left-hand side, and the languages that are written here are Daraang, Khamuang, Thai, and English. I need to mention that Khamuang is a regional language of northern Thailand, and this is in fact a lingua franca of all the contacts. Standard Thai is almost not spoken by language communities in the countryside. Now I would like to move to Karen community. We have been working especially with the Karen healer, as Miss Nanyala Kwantanloat, since 2023. We worked on the indigenous knowledge of the Karen communities. We also started with meeting the elders. This is the grandfather of Monan. And I don't have time to play the video, but this is how I elicit knowledge about the plants' names in Karen. We created a brochure that is in Thai and in English language. It also has Karen entries and descriptions together with Monan, with the Karen lady. So we also practice the research design and implementation together with our minority community friend. And the last, so the language portraits showed 3 languages as well, usually Khamuang, Thai, and Karen. And Malabri community is really vulnerable. There are around 450 persons. I even feel uncomfortable by saying that, but many communities are under administration or actually management / protection of forestry units. In practice, it looks like that the community lives in a village that is managed by persons in uniforms who are well-meaning, but still the social dynamics differs from other communities in Thailand. As you can see, we went to the school, Malabri school. In the background, you can also see some forestry division persons in uniforms who actually teach the children. The language portrait showed several languages, Malabari, Camuang as well, Thai and Mien. And because I'm running out of time, I wanted to share some main observations. So none of the participants from this group is monolingual. All of them speak other languages as well, and they treat it as something normal. Camuang turns out to be the lingua franca of the region, and when it comes to all these communities, Malabari community seems to be the most multilingual, most social one, while at the same time this community really avoids speaking Camuang, the regional language, preferring standard Thai. And I think this is an interesting sociolinguistic question to follow up on, because now I would like not to make any guesses. So also all participants think in and identify with their first indigenous language. And also when it comes to Daraang and Malabari community, they tend to learn more the languages of their neighbors. And I think that's because Daraang community is a refugee community. It doesn't have a strong, solid social standing in Thailand. And Malabari community is very small. And as you've heard, it's often interfered with by state officials. The Karen speakers, they are a bigger group. And I presume that this is why also, and they are well established in Thailand, and I think this is why maybe they learn other neighbor languages less, but I think it's also interesting to follow up on this question. And when it comes to drawings, head, heart, and stomach were usually the main localizations with which languages, feelings, emotions were associated. So these are the languages presented by Camuang, by Karen community. And that's all. And thank you very much for your attention.
Hola, bona tarda. Si teniu pinganillo, feu-lo servir perquè faré la xerrada en català. Sí? Vale. Benvinguts, moltes gràcies a la Hailey per convidar-me, a la Mònica Perenya i al Linguapax. Començo la meva experiència explicant com he estat implicada en el suport d'una llengua minoritzada, que és el totoli, ja us en parlaré. I agafaré una perspectiva, ja veureu, més acadèmica, menys d'activisme, perquè és la posició des d'on estic. Jo em dedico a la documentació i la descripció de llengües austronèsiques, llengües, ja us ensenyaré on es parlen, i una d'elles és el totoli. La documentació del totoli, ja veieu aquí que és una feina que estem fent conjuntament amb investigadors de la Universitat de Colònia, el Christoph Brax i el Nikolaus Himmelmann, però també amb membres de la comunitat totoli, sobretot el Datra Hassan i el Sumitro Poggi. La documentació del totoli va començar molt abans del 2017, però aquest projecte, aquest corpus amb el qual jo treballo, va començar el 2017. Dins d'aquest corpus de documentació de la llengua hi ha un subcorpus de llengua de nens o parla dirigida als nens, i crec que és rellevant perquè també en vull parlar més endavant. Bé, el totoli és una llengua austronèsica occidental que es parla a Indonèsia, a l'illa de Sulawesi, a una regió que es diu Toli-Toli, i que actualment té uns 5.000 parlants, però fa 20 anys en tenia 21.000. És a dir, que és una llengua que està en perill d'extinció, és una llengua amenaçada que va perdent parlants. Aquí és on jo vaig treballar de camp i aquí també és on hem estat creant el corpus de llengua del totoli de parla dirigida als nens o de la parla dels nens. I llavors em feia il·lusió o crec que és rellevant també esmentar en quin marc estem creant aquest corpus, perquè moltes vegades quan treballem amb llengües minoritzades creiem que no podem fer recerca sobre adquisició de llengües perquè la recerca d'adquisició de llengües està basada en la que coneixem, no? En anglès o en castellà, sempre es basa en uns corpus gegantins amb moltíssimes dades i amb una llengua minoritzada mai tenim molts nens, no? No hi ha tants nens. I ara, des del 2023, hi ha un marc que és l'Acquisition Sketch Project que et dona unes guies per poder recollir dades sobre adquisició de llengües i que té un focus especial en llengües que no estiguin descrites, llengües molt més petites. I en parlo també perquè crec que, primer de tot, gravar nens, recollir dades de nens i el fet de posar la càmera dins del menjador o dins de la casa d'algú és un setting molt intrusiu. I crec doncs, que això també és un punt que es pot discutir quan parlem d'aquestes relacions equitatives. A més de la documentació del Totoli, també quan vaig a Indonèsia el que faig és tallers amb l'Agència Nacional d'Indonèsia per la Recerca, el BRIN. Llavors fem tallers per investigadors locals sobre documentació lingüística i què fer un cop has recollit dades d'una llengua, publicar o fer estudis de corpus. Llavors, ja ho veieu, no?, que aquesta perspectiva no és d'activisme, és més aviat acadèmica. A mi el que m'interessa és la morfosintaxi i tot això ha estat finançat amb diners de la Fundació Alemanya d'Investigació. Però ja ho veieu que això em col·loca en una posició concreta i crec que tot i així, tota aquesta tasca també pot o ha de ser sostenible i equitativa. I això m'agradaria explicar-vos-ho, o com crec que ha de ser, a partir de la definició de documentació lingüística que dona Nikolaus Himmelmann. Nikolaus Himmelmann diu que la documentació lingüística ha de ser un registre de la llengua que duri i que tingui més d'una funció. Que sigui un registre vol dir que haurem de treballar amb dades. I jo crec que el tipus de dades que fem servir i què fem fer als parlants quan documentem la seva llengua també és un punt on començar a ser sostenibles. Hem de gravar coses típiques i pròpies de la comunitat. Després necessitem que aquestes dades durin. Necessitem que aquestes dades es mantinguin en el temps. Perquè, primer de tot, perquè això ha de ser un material per la comunitat i després perquè moltes d'aquestes llengües que documentem, en aquest cas el totoli, sabem que d'aquí 20 anys potser no tindrem accés a aquestes dades i que els parlants també necessiten poder accedir a aquestes dades en un futur. Llavors, això és... El que hem de fer aquí és arxivar les dades, i hi ha diferents opcions. Això és una lluita que tinc amb el Comitè de Bioètica, perquè les comissions de bioètica requereixen que dades personals s'eliminin al cap de 5 anys o 10 anys, depèn de la universitat. Jo crec que això és una cosa que val la pena discutir i que potser té sentit per a algun tipus d'investigació, però que potser no tindria sentit quan parlem de llengües minoritzades o llengües amenaçades. Però, a part de les normes que tingui cada universitat, sí que hi ha alguns arxius que et permeten arxivar les dades seguint els principis FAIR. I després, l'últim és que si gastem recursos per una documentació lingüística, doncs aquesta documentació o aquestes dades que recollim hauran de poder servir doncs, per altres recerques i per la comunitat. No? I aquí és on entra aquesta altra part. No només hauríem de fer la nostra recerca, sinó que doncs, el que intento o el que intentem és que aquesta documentació o les dades recollides també puguin aportar alguna cosa a la comunitat. Llavors, aquí us poso només doncs, les 3 experiències en què he estat implicada. Una és doncs, col·laborar en la creació de material escolar. Després, la petició de la comunitat és que tot allò que estic publicant i que és en anglès i que és en un nivell acadèmic alt, que si ho puc passar a l'indonesi i en un nivell doncs, més entenedor. I és una cosa en què estic treballant ara mateix. I després, com també veieu a la foto, estem creant altres materials, perquè sempre pensem que potser no, que els llibres per nens poden ser una molt bona opció i el Josep Cru ens ha ensenyat un molt bon exemple, però hi ha comunitats on llegir llibres no és la pràctica cultural ni la més freqüent. Per tant, ara el que estem fent doncs, és crear una base de dades de jocs tant tradicionals com jocs nous que, a més, doncs, intentin doncs, promocionar l'ús de la llengua. Llavors, com tothom, també hi ha els reptes, no? I després alguns èxits, i és que, tal com heu dit, el temps, el finançament són reptes molt importants, però jo trobo que també moltes vegades no sé ben bé quin rol he d'agafar, no? Hi ha vegades que no sé fins a quin punt la meva posició fa que la comunitat accedeixi a certes gravacions o a certs contextos que potser no són de l'interès de la comunitat. També crec que és molt important o una dificultat com explico la recerca, no? Quan fem investigació sobre el català o sobre l'espanyol, els participants als estudis saben perfectament què es fa en una universitat i què és un estudi científic, però hi ha d'altres parts del món, com a Toli, on això no és una realitat diària i, per tant, explicar això o presentar un full de consentiment informat doncs sempre és un repte. Un repte molt important i que em preocupa molt és que els outputs, no, els resultats de la meva recerca no acaben de lligar amb les necessitats de la comunitat, que sempre són 2 feines paral·leles i que trobo que les 2 són molt necessàries, però si tenim aquesta pressió acadèmica d'anar publicant i d'anar creant resultats, doncs aquesta altra part queda una mica obligada. I després, doncs, èxits és que el projecte, no? El simple fet que existeixi el projecte Toli ha creat o ha fet que la comunitat també reflecteixi, no? Sobre la seva llengua i tot i no tenir una tradició molt de reflexió metalingüística, doncs el fet que hi hagi algú que tingui interès per la teva llengua fa que tu mateix també doncs valoris la teva llengua. I també em sap greu o em fa vergonya donar consells, però aquests serien una mica els mantres que em repeteixo, i és que no cal ser el lingüista helicòpter, no? Que recull dades sense ni tan sols aterrar. Cal escoltar les necessitats de la comunitat i això implica passar-hi molt temps, fer o promoure iniciatives de capacity building. També s'hauran d'implicar universitats locals i membres de la comunitat i sobretot doncs, donar accés a les dades a la comunitat i a altres investigadors, però cal tenir en compte que l'accés obert no és la millor opció per tothom sempre, i sobretot doncs, donar suport a iniciatives de revitalització. Això és tot i discutim.
Pidivieje, mun nome David Kroik, man Nuerto universitets. Ecem image paresamistit, ecem England ngelam substit. Hi, my name is David Kroik. I am a trained linguist. I work at Nord University in Norway. And I decided on the title Supporting Indigenous South Sami Communities as a researcher. And I will look into my ways of collaborating with speakers of a small indigenous minority language. And for a starter, I will try to keep this quite brief, since we could go on and on with yet another indigenous language suffering from colonization, current extractivism. So it feels a little bit, it's the same story repeating itself, although colonialism plays out different in different contexts. So, but I think a few things are quite important to point out as it regards to South Sami. First of all, it's a quite small community, some 500 up to 1,000 speakers that speak this very language. So quite few speakers. And many of you have probably heard about Sami, but then you most probably have heard about North Sami, and this is a completely different language. They're not quite mutually intelligible. So this is one of the smaller Sami languages. It's spoken both in Sweden and Norway, but I will be focusing most on the Norwegian context, or as I try to put it, the part of Sápmi that overlaps with the nation state of Norway. So this language is spoken in an area with some nearly 1.5 million speakers of other languages, Swedish and Norwegian, where they have made their home. This is a Fenno-Ugric language, and it's quite dissimilar to both Swedish and Norwegian. So these languages in structure and vocabulary, they're quite dissimilar. I'm not only a linguist, I was a trained linguist, and I'm atoning for my sins as a generative grammarian, where I started my career. I'm now a very applied linguist, but I still do some work with so to say, language as an object, although less and less. So I do most of my work in schools, in schools where South Sami is taught mostly as a subject. We don't have proper immersion schools, so this is one of the challenges. And I have tried to make a map here which situates this context, because I'm sure that most of you aren't familiar with the South Sami area. And I also pointed out to this Nord University where I am based. And let's see. Nord University is the one university in Norway which has the responsibility for South Sami. And this is a legal, it's a political, and it's a moral responsibility. In Norway, there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission which pointed out on the various pointed out an implementational gap between policy and practice on many areas. Language and education is one of them. So the main thing I do in my role as a language and a language teaching and learning scholar is that I teach on a master's program in South Sami teacher education. So that's the work of my heart, so to say. The first cohort of teachers graduated 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you can see them here. Currently, we have one student enrolled who constitute the second cohort. So these are small numbers of teachers in training. But for this language with so few speakers, bringing about more languages does make an impact, I think. A few words on myself. I started out as an activist or as a scholar. At least I started as a learner. I started learning this language when I was in my 20s, my early 20s. So, and I have been an activist in various roles. One of them was, here are my two children. So since I learned this language, I wanted to pass it on to them. And in Sweden, where I am based, we had just got this legislation that obliged municipalities to provide preschooling in Sami. So I advocated for this. This was like facing a wall. I was so naive at that time. I thought that if you have legislation in place, that would actually make a difference in practice. Long story short, it was way harder than that. So this was a really tough time in my life, but it taught me a few lessons, and I learned about things like the policy practice gap, and I got a vocabulary. And that's maybe where I started my career as a sociolinguist and not as a generative grammarian. So a few years after I advocated for the sake of my children, I actually became an applied linguist as well. A few years ago, I earned my PhD as well. So what I do as a scholar is I teach South Sami at various levels. I have PhDs. I have one PhD student who will probably be the first to publish on language in the South Sami language. And that brings us, with 3 minutes to go, to my current research project, which is called Revitalization Processes in Education. And you can see on the screen that we have two main objectives, which I thought match this panel quite well. I won't delve deeper into them. We are 4 team members. So we are both, we have Richard Kowalik, who is an outsider documentary linguist who has worked a few years on South Sami. It's me. I have my mentor, Hilde Solid, who is a scholar of Norwegian and on Sami sociolinguistic matters at UiT, at the Arctic University of Norway in Tromsø. And a former student of mine who is now a teacher is working along with us, publishing papers with me and doing documentary work in her work as a school teacher of South Sami. So we're a small team, but we're trying to bridge documentary linguistics with applied linguistic and educational linguistic and language teaching and learning. So to the final point, the project that I set up does have a stakeholder network. So I was able to enroll 4 members from the South Sami communities that support us, that guide us in ethical matters, in linguistic matters, and so on. And I wanted to share that the way I could enroll them to be part of a research project was due to my position and my relation, which was ongoing with them since dating back some 15 to 20 years in time. And we meet a few times a year to discuss matters relating to this research project that I am working with. So this is maybe one of the key points of my work as a South Sami scholar, that relationality and time really does have an impact. So one way that we actually let the stakeholder group of South Sami scholars impact our research is when they said that we need to talk to more people than only focusing on teachers in the very community. We did so. And this coincided that Hallie, one of my research partners, actually approached me for a collaboration with Fosterland. But we try to listen to what the stakeholder group, the input that we get from this group. And relations with the teachers that I work with in this project is also ongoing since many years. For instance, it's one of the teachers is a former student of mine who wrote her master's with me as a supervisor in South Sami, the very first thesis at my university. So with time coming up, I say keihto, or thank you for listening, and I look forward to the discussion.
Hello, good afternoon again. Finally, in this already long session, I don't want to take a lot of your time, but I would like to share some of my current ideas, my current thoughts about partnerships with indigenous and minoritized communities, and I would start with my positionality. So I often describe myself as a self-reflective ally of local communities, but obviously this is not just what I can say. The communities have to accept me in this role, and I can only be their ally or think about myself as their ally as long as they accept me in this role. And it's never something that's like a state I reached. I try to think about it as a process, in the last 5 years, we've been discussing more and more in our team what it really means to be an ally of local communities, what to do decolonial research, how to reconcile these ideas we've been collectively developing with our part of our team are indigenous or minoritized researchers. So we've been collectively thinking about it, and it's sometimes really hard to do it critically and without making too many compromises when you're an academic researcher because of the structures of the academy and the rules you're expected to obey. And one of the most inspiring books I found in the last several years is this doing rebellious research in beyond the academy. It was inspired by the global health crisis of the COVID pandemic, but this rebellious research is something that I think many of us share. In many ways, it's not always open rebellion. This is sometimes more covered forms of rebellion or questioning certain rules. And I can say we started a long time ago in doing different activities with our team members together with community members. And this is nothing new. It is nothing, I would say, exceptional, because probably all of you are doing the same thing in different ways. If you are academics, you engage in a number of activities that try to foster knowledge exchange. This is one of the initiatives we've been doing in Mexico, workshops entirely in contemporary variants of Nahuatl, focusing on reading historical Nahuatl texts with the descendants of people who wrote them, often trying to choose, doing our best to choose the same texts coming from the same regions where some communities from which some of the participants come, to show this, to enhance or explore possible sense of continuity. And also decolonizing this, what's in many indigenous regions or nation states where different indigenous languages or minority languages are spoken, is that the variation, the differences between languages and also within languages, they are so huge that they are actually separate languages and you cannot communicate. This is also one of the ideas that many Nahuatl speakers have, that they cannot communicate across variants. So these meetings actually were challenges this idea and did challenge this idea, as people coming from very different regions could communicate without the use of Spanish. And more and more in our as different projects with communities developed, we were giving more and more priority to community-driven initiatives and products. But I don't see it's anything unusual. Many academics working with communities do that today. Perhaps one thing I'm really proud about that in the project that's European Research Council funded project, our first product was not an academic publication, but a community written book, trilingual book on traditional food recipes from Tepango de Rodriguez, because this was developed by local teachers and grandparents, grandmothers mainly. And it was our first product, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And this kind of collaborative products where we are supporting allies, bring about many opportunities for exchange, for knowledge production, for forging different forms of partnerships, not just between academia and communities, but this is the case of Tepango de Rodriguez, a Totonac community in the Sierra Norte de Puebla region, where I currently been working for the last several years. But also between different communities and within communities. And this is followed by another initiative that I also don't perceive it as particularly novel, because there have been many initiatives like this across the world. This is a campaign, Growing Your Language, that brings together schools and preschools from Totonac and Nahuatl region, speakers of Totonac and Nahuatl, and engages parents and teachers in the joint effort to keep the transmission of their language, and also being aware of the benefits that this can generate. And I'm not talking only about benefits that we as academics are aware of because of the psycholinguistic research, for example, but also the benefits from the point of view of the communities. So this has been quite important, and I continue to work with Nahuatl students from the region in local universities like Lipuntahuaca or Ahuacatlan, entirely in Nahuatl, promoting also different forms of communication and the uses of the language. But again, well, I consider this a very important part of this alliance. I'm not quite satisfied with it. I'm happy that this has become a widespread practice in different academic community partnerships. And this is not just about indigenous regions, it's also about what we call, at least in our team, Global South in the Global North, so minoritized traditional context, multilingual context in Europe, communities which suffered from internal forms of colonialism, like the Kashubian community with which we work. We've been working and we keep working, and within the same ERC-funded project, community members and our project members from Kashubia developed an exhibition in the local memory chamber, one of the Kashubian villages in Kashubian in Polish, and this is also kind of stimulus for the local community to learn about the past and reconsider their past. And another thing that we somehow might have contributed, but again, I'm not trying to take the credit for this, is that different kinds of events, partnerships and collaborative events make it possible for members of different communities to enter into direct collaboration, and we are obviously not needed there. We are just facilitators, and this has happened in our different projects, and this is probably the first time it happened in 2017, when members of the Wilamowian community would go to our field school, language revitalization field school in Tlaxcala, in Nahuatl communities, and would interact with speakers of indigenous languages from Mexico, but also there were activists from Catalonia. I don't know if Albert is here. Albert was actually, Albert was translating to Spanish, actually, from Polish during this event, if I remember. So it was pretty cool. And this is one of the most beautiful aspects of this encounters. And again, we really, as academics, what we can sometimes take credit for is being facilitators of this kind of encounters, but this is not, we should not be like the primary actors there, I think. And as I was thinking about this process, our research partners in Wilamowice decided to launch a series of conferences that focus entirely on Wymysłów language and culture. And then they published this book about Wilamowian engaged research that's trilingual. The first title is in Wymysłów. And this was an opportunity for me to sum up, I mean, what I have learned. And then I really realized this was not just about learning, but probably most of this was about unlearning. What I was taught, what I was trained to do, what I believed in, different stereotypes, different forms of academic prejudice. And I wouldn't have been able to do this just being a researcher in the academy. I could do it because of the community and what I learned in the community. And this actually unfolded on so many levels that when I started to put it together, it was almost like overwhelming. So there are different things. For example, how you listen to people. That you can sometimes you need to listen one story several times. So there's deep listening in the fieldwork, and until you understand, until you really try and get some kind of understanding of local knowledge, or that you really have to be a long-term partner. You cannot just do one project because you have funding for 3 or 5 years and then go away. I mean, this sometimes can do more harm than anything good. The ways you have to relate to places, not just to communities, languages, material heritage, written traditions, but also places as places that the suffering, places that like are part of this collective suffering, collective memory, collective trauma, and just being there is important. So this is kind of like a summary of what I really think we can learn. But again, this is just the step when I wrote it, and I hope I will understand and learn more, and obviously other people will understand even more than I can do. And then I want to say about something that I don't consider very usual, and that goes beyond these collaborative activities that usually end up or finalize are sort of finalized or with community-based products. So we basically do something with the community and then help the community to develop some materials, or we do it collaboratively and we publish these materials. And then there is some kind of projects. Stories, teaching materials, and so on. And I think it's just something that we really need to keep doing if the community needs it. But then, as academics, that's much more what we can do. Because if we just do this, then we still extract and use local knowledge without making our local partners equitable partners. And this was something that has been haunting me for a long time, because then obviously you cannot involve the whole community as your co-authors, right? And the way that this has been dealt with in the academy is just acknowledgement, right? And you mention communities, you mention people, but I just felt it's not enough. I felt it's just not enough. So we started to experiment with collective authorship. But then I'm aware, even more, I mean, this is like a growing awareness of tokenism. So it's not just about adding your indigenous collaborators as co-authors of what you do. I mean, this is even more patronizing. And I know it's been done. I've seen dissertations written by indigenous students that were not really written by them, but by their supervisors. And it's so much harm. And so much, I would say, like patronizing approach. So instead of really allocating time to make it possible for this person to write their thesis their own way, they do it in their academic way because they have this limited time and it just has to be done, right? And it just has been so frustrating. So in this first work, indigenous, I decided to include the indigenous contributors as equal co-authors because they participated at every stage of the research. So basically helping us create research tools, collecting data face to face. This was like the key thing. and also participating in the discussions. And I felt like maybe in this publication that has been really important for us because it was the first paper that showed the positive relationship between speaking indigenous languages and the sense of emic well-being, measured with an emic scale based on emic research in Nahuatl, not Western scales. But it was not enough to me. I felt like, okay, maybe I could do it better. And then I had another idea how to do it a bit better. In this paper on the effects of ethno-linguistic discrimination on PTSD, depression, and health, it was done with public health experts from the Medical University in Krakow. And for this one, I decided, okay, it's not enough to, I don't want to put just their names. So we had these quantitative results. We had a long session, all in Nahuatl, and we discussed them. What it really means. Does it make any sense? This quantitative results. How can you relate to your own experience? And we recorded it and we wrote it down, and this became the part of the discussion and interpretation. And you know what happened? In the journal, which is quite a prestigious journal, they said, what's the basis for this data? How are you going to quote it? Is it like a registered data set? What is it? And then I explained what it is, what kind of extremely valid emic knowledge it is. And I also had experience when this kind of things in really high-level journals were obviously dismissed. But they said, all right, it's okay. No, they just accepted it. And I think it also has contributed to the way of like transforming certain practices in the academy, where this kind of evidence, that's emic evidence, that's created differently that academic norms would expect, is accepted as a valid academic knowledge, not just in our research bubble, but outside that bubble. So I was really happy when this happened. And so we continue doing this. We keep continuing. So we have, for example, one, actually, my thanks go to Pera Comes for this opportunity to publish in Catalan. I was invited to this, and we did it together. It's in Catalan, and we did together this text with two of my indigenous collaborators, Totonac and Nawa researchers. And then another example is the paper about connecting quantitative and qualitative data in the research of historical trauma and how it relates to distrust to non-community members, to Poles among Wemco community. And this was so deeply discussed and really done in synergy between an academic researcher, a quantitative researcher, Magda Skrocka, and Ania Maślana Nawena Duć-Pfeiffer, who's also a member of this event, that it was just, and we had problems to publish it. We were rejected in 2 journals because it was not so like conventional. So what are you trying to do? You do it either quantitative or do it either qualitative. You can do it both, but it only made sense this way. So we were patient and it got published, and I think it's transformative, really. So this is the way I would like to keep going, and I think we should really talk about it and not maybe make it better. It's just a certain step I'm sharing and certain enthusiasm I'm sharing, but there's so much tokenism, and tokenism is so harmful. Just to finish, last week we had a workshop about AI and marginal knowledge systems, and someone on Facebook commented on this without participating, without knowing the presenters, and knowing just reading the program, that there was a researcher presenting in Nahuatl and there was no indigenous co-author. And I explained to this guy, well, why it happened, what kind of data were used, and he said, you should have at least added some names. Okay. So I leave it without a comment, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now invite the presenters up to the mesa, the table, please. And you can ask the questions you've been burning to ask.
Yeah.
Sure, we're going in order again.
Yeah. What about you? You can.
Oh. The whole thing
Yeah.
or should?
Say this one.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. We've heard some really insightful experiences from different parts of the world and different contexts. And we are quite a bit behind schedule, so I will have to change a little bit of the schedule. But I want to then dive right into your questions or comments so that you have a chance to engage with the panel. Any questions?
Buenas tardes, todos y todas. Bueno, yo quisiera hacer primero como una pequeña reflexión para luego saber desde la perspectiva de ustedes cómo lo ven, porque veo que es una mesa universitaria y me parece que es muy interesante poder hacer la reflexión. Yo creo que estamos reflexionando frente a un cambio de paradigma en los procesos de revitalización. Y en ese cambio de paradigma, por lo menos veo tres puntos que están sucediendo. Uno es que evidentemente la lengua o las lenguas han superado afortunadamente su consideración como simple medio de comunicación, y las lenguas hacen parte para las comunidades de sus procesos organizativos, de pervivencia, de justicia, de lucha, de resistencia. Creo que ese es un lugar muy importante que está dando un giro a la revitalización, es decir, la forma en que comprendemos la lengua dentro de la propia comunidad. Realmente, con respecto al papel de los lingüistas, yo creo que ha cambiado. Ha cambiado, no ha cambiado, pero está intentando, sugiriendo que los proyectos revitalizadores no los pueden inventar. Bueno, parece que ahí prendió, sí. Bueno, entonces, con respecto al papel, bueno, al primero que dije, la lengua no como medio de comunicación, sino como una parte de la pervivencia. No nos corresponde inventar proyectos en la universidad para evitar, sino cómo podemos acompañar procesos que se están dando y gestar otros seguramente. Y en tercer lugar, con respecto a eso mismo, yo creo que nos hemos equivocado en la lectura, y esto referente a una reflexión, una pregunta que hacían antes del almuerzo, y era, bueno, hubo como una ruptura en la revitalización, porque hubo dolores y hubo mucho involución y una generación que paró la transmisión, y la pregunta de la compañera era cómo se reactivó. Pero yo creo que realmente nos corresponde ver que en las comunidades no ha parado la resistencia, ni la transmisión, es decir, se ha mermado, pero hay una resistencia que se mantiene, que a veces como profesionales o como lingüistas no podemos ver, y entonces creemos que no hay procesos revitalizadores, y los procesos revitalizadores, por lo menos en el caso que estamos nosotros compartiendo acá del pueblo Nasa, nosotros no hemos comenzado un proceso, hemos continuado un proceso que tiene muchos años. Entonces yo creo que estos distintos cambios que están dando en el lugar de la lengua, en el lugar de los lingüistas, en cómo aprender a ser parte de esos procesos y cómo poder romper realmente el límite que nos pone la academia frente a lo que son los procesos revitalizadores en el territorio. Yo creo que la academia tiene grandes retos frente a cómo desde las comunidades seguimos impulsando estos proyectos. No sé si se trata solamente de reajustar los marcos normativos, actualizar la Declaración de los Derechos Lingüísticos, porque finalmente, si esas herramientas no tienen una operatividad que desde la localidad lo veamos, pues vamos a seguir reuniéndonos en infinidad de foros, pero no vamos a poder cambiar. Yo creo que tanto nuestro papel como profesionales y como personas, pero también como instituciones y como academia, ¿no? Yo realmente hago parte más de los procesos comunitarios, pero también me doy pasos a veces en la academia y siempre me pregunto, ¿cómo ven ustedes ese reto de articular realmente, no puntualmente, en un proyecto que yo voy como, sino realmente, ¿cómo vamos a hacer para articularnos a los procesos lingüísticos que son procesos de resistencia y son procesos políticos? Eso para terminar, que la lingüística no es apolítica, sino que también nos implica un poco más allá. Y en la academia también creo que está llamado a coger ese nivel político de lo que estamos haciendo y no solo pedagógico o descriptivo, sino que necesitamos el apoyo político, no solamente en términos, digamos, técnicos o académicos. Bueno.
¿Qué quiere comentar o contestar? El papel político de la investigación, the political side of research. Hello? Yes? No? Would anyone like to respond or reflect on research, the political potential of research? Quizás es una forma de resumirlo.
Gracias por el comentario y realmente es un reto, ¿no? Y no quiero decir que se haya solucionado ni mucho menos. Yo creo que hay distintas opciones y yo creo que los proyectos que se piden tienen que tener siempre este apartado, ¿no? De qué más se va a hacer aparte de la investigación. Es decir, tenemos ya unas plantillas que nos dan, ¿no? Cuando tenemos que pedir un proyecto y hay una parte así como de impacto social, estas cosas van apareciendo, pero son aún muy simbólicas y son partes muy pequeñas. Pues estas partes tienen que llenarse con un montón de información para que puedan llegar, ¿no?, a los paneles de revisión y pueda haber, pues, que se vea que estos proyectos tienen esta parte más de acción, sea política, sea social, sea las dos cosas. Es una idea que se me ocurre, pero es solamente, ¿no?, una pequeña cosa para, pues, sí, conectar estos dos mundos. Es para sumar ideas, ¿eh?
Desde mi perspectiva, y es una perspectiva combinada desde la perspectiva de Polonia y la perspectiva que conozco un poco trabajando muchos años en México, el impacto más grande que vi nunca se vinculaba al nivel de cualquier tipo de compromiso o colaboración a nivel político, sino el nivel el impacto que vi, el más grande, que más duradero y más impresionante siempre ha venido desde organizaciones locales y desde comunidades locales y fue basado en su autonomía. Y yo creo que esta autonomía de comunidades en ese sentido es también algo que es importante para investigadores en la academia, que siempre tenemos que defender nuestra ¿cómo se dice? Libertad académica absoluta y siempre está sujeta a varias presiones, a veces no son tan evidentes. Y realmente si podemos hacer algún impacto a nivel político, por ejemplo, en la transformación de la ley o de las ciertas prácticas, está muy bien. Pero me temo que esto está un poco fuera de nosotros porque los políticos no están interesados en la ciencia y en el desarrollo de la ciencia y lo que para mí crea un cierto tipo de riesgo es cualquier tipo de compromiso que podría realmente o sea, comprometer nuestras investigaciones a un nivel de que ya no estamos ejerciendo plena autonomía, plena libertad académica. Creo que eso es muy importante. Además, es tan frustrante ver cuánto potencial académico y conocimiento de comunidades y conocimiento académico se está gastando, mientras que este conocimiento está accesible a los políticos. O sea, se podría aplicar a buenos usos sociales y no se está haciendo, ¿no? O sea, es muy frustrante. Y quiero terminar con una cosa que dijo uno de los revitalizadores de la lengua Messierisch, Tymoteusz Król, cuando por la segunda vez rechazó el presidente la firma para reconocer su lengua como lengua regional. Él lo dijo lo siguiente: si hay reconocimiento del presidente y de la ley o si no hay, nuestra lengua existe y es un hecho, existe y va a seguir siendo hablada.
Thank you very much for this very interesting question. I just wanted to add something maybe on the side. I believe that in general, linguistics is a highly politicized field. And even if we look at historical linguistics, we can find interesting stories and angles that determine the interpretation about the origins of a given country. For example, if we look at Turkey, Hungary, or Mongolia, all of these countries claim some common origin, and then linguists also sometimes try to follow this very old genealogy to Xiongnu, for example, communities. But also I wanted to mention another scenarios that, for example, linguistics is a politicized field, for example, in the countries that have been under heavy colonial influence from other countries, where the nation state has been endangered by on many occasions, and the preservation of the national language has been the main goal of the state. And carrying out research on minoritized languages in these settings is already quite difficult. And also another scenario that I wanted to mention is that sometimes we carry out research on minoritized languages in countries that are not entirely democratic. And then if we really have to be very careful how we position ourselves as researchers, so that we, for example, don't harm the minorities by supporting them politically, because then we play into the narrative of the government that might be already being cautious about the activities of the minorities. So these are just my comments. I don't want to name any countries because I don't want to get into details and problems at this moment, but I just wanted to like highlight different politicized scenarios in which linguistics can be a very fragile, not fragile, but we have to be careful as linguists. Thank you.
No era una pregunta, era un poco comentario y clarificación, si es posible o si tiene que responder el resto de la mesa o no. Vale. Bueno, gracias por las interesantes intervenciones. Yo quería un poco en esta discusión, creo que se ha hablado también, ¿no? Pero realmente todas las personas que estamos en cierto modo involucradas en proyectos de revitalización, o sea, quiero decir, también tenemos un papel de agencia política clara, es decir, aparte de, o sea, entender la política no tanto como ligado a un poder gubernamental, sino como agencia, ¿no? Es decir, en el sentido de agencia social, política, lenguas no se pueden, en el contexto en el que las estamos estudiando, no las entendemos como objetos reificados, ¿no? Y en el momento en el que estamos siempre hablando de ellas como construcciones históricas, culturales, estamos metidos en cuestiones como cuando hablamos de política lingüística, ¿no? ¿Hasta qué punto es política, hasta qué punto es lingüística? Entonces yo creo que es interesante, ¿no? También reflexionar sobre la necesaria posicionalidad, como estábamos comentando, que bueno, pues es un nuevo paradigma, ¿no? También de la sociolingüística más comprometida, que rechaza posiciones tan positivistas como ha habido, bueno, pues por otros paradigmas de la lingüística formal, ¿no? Totalmente útiles y necesarios para otros propósitos, pero yo creo que no para lo que estamos tratando en este panel, ¿no? Justamente.
I think my colleagues have already said some really helpful, made some really helpful contributions to this. One thing I would say is that it's important for researchers, there's a lot we cannot change about the institutions that we work in, about the funders that support or do not support our research. A lot of off-the-record conversations can be really helpful in learning how to navigate those, probably not right here, right now, but also, I would just say that though we also need to know where we do have power, especially when we do get funding, that we need to make sure that we don't fall into the trap of still thinking that we can't do anything or that we'll never change anything. Like when you're working with communities who often aren't resourced very well at all, they can do so much with so little. They're very, very good at stretching funding, at stretching support. Yeah. So I guess
That's wrong.
yeah. But I guess I would say that we need to as we're entering, I completely agree that there seems to be a new paradigm unfolding before our eyes, and it's really exciting to be a part of. I think that the presentations here have already showed the complexity of what revitalization work can look like. And so we need to I guess, be really creative, and be really grounded in the power that we do have, and be really as flexible as possible to respond to what is needed by the people that we're working with. Because there can be many stories of a single project, and you as the researcher do have the power to kind of shape which story gets told to which audience. And how the research has been conducted and how you and your collaborators work together.
Just want to say one more thing. I agree about power and agency, but it's not only power, it's also privilege. We come with privilege, and we can't get rid of this privilege. We have to constantly reflect about the privilege we hold, how to use it well or not use it, but we just can't ignore it. And yeah, and this is the whole another discussion. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this dialogue. I want to raise a couple of points we're thinking about. I think the idea that you are seeking to preserve languages for another community is just one way of thinking. There are instances where you are a member of that community itself, right? So you're not an outsider, you're an insider of the community. And if you're an insider member of that community and you're trying to preserve languages which are spoken in that community, a number of issues immediately come to the fore. How do you access and disclose information in your community, right, where you are a member of the community? Because not all communities want their information to be released and and dispose to the power. Right, that is one thing. The second thing is that when you are an insider to a community that you are researching, certain issues about ethical responsibility, whatever ethics means, become important. If I'm researching Catalan community, after some time I can go away. If I'm researching my own community, where my parents, relatives, and uncles live in, the gravity of responsibility becomes different. And I think it is important almost there that you. Then I think the discussion about linguistics and politics is an interesting one. To me, linguistics is highly ideological and political. From whether you're studying syntax, semantics, etc., and all that, those are highly politicized understanding of what you think constitutes human language. Right. So the important thing, the most dramatic way of thinking about politics of linguistics is this. Imagine if Saussure was an African. What type of linguistics you guys talk about? So in other words, the way this whole concept is an impact on the way linguistics is taught. It's understood. Linguists believe that what they are teaching is generally beneficial to the students that they teach. But if you were to ask them, is there, you ever look into the possibilities that linguistics might have a collateral damage and adverse effect on some of the students that you're dealing with? Because right. So what I'm trying to say is that somehow we got into the belief that teaching linguistics, the neutral thing, is beneficial to our students. But you can take the question back and say, what linguistics teaches you is a form of bureaucratic thinking. Let me give you an example. You get data and you're told about having this much rules that you gave out. Typically, one solution. So linguistics is the equivalent of bureaucracy in language study.
Any comments?
Can I respond?
Please.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I should be at least responding to the comment. I'm not. I should be maybe responding to your comment on being an insider linguist and working on your within your own community. So I mean, there are two sides of the coins, or there's not even two sides of the coins. I mean, your positionality vis-a-vis the community, it's a scale, so to say. So in my experience, I have been conducting research within communities where I do find relatives of my own. And I mean, it's different, but it's not a completely different thing. You still need to approach this in the same way as an outsider linguist would have, in a way. Since you have to be open about it, you have to you have to reflect on what kind of ethical issues that you are tackling in your, say, if you're writing a methodology section, you have to bring up how did you relate to a community member bringing you in. So I mean, there are differences, and there are things that don't differ that much. I mean, now I'm speaking from experience doing work within your own community. I don't know how it is to work in other communities. I couldn't really say that it's a completely different thing, but the way I conceptualize it, I think it's similar challenges that you address from different positions. I don't know if I'm making sense out of this.
But this, I think the point was that the stakes are much higher when it's your community because you only
Yeah, of
you're
course.
one, you know, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
of
like,
course.
you can't just like, somebody had the helicopter slide, yeah, you
I
can't
know.
just leave if things go.
Yeah, that was one of the points I was trying to make on I don't know if you saw my last slide. I maybe didn't make that point very clear, but for me as an insider linguist in the South Sami community, I have been doing work teaching undergraduate students, teaching school kids my own language, which is a language that I have learned. I've been doing that for 20 years. And I see myself doing that in 20 years as well. There's no retreat for me. So that's a great point. So I'm I have digged myself in even further into my own community. And there's no way of going back, so to say. Yeah. So that's a completely different situation.
I have two comments to this. So I think that being an EMIC researcher, when you decide to being a community member and you're also becoming an EMIC researcher that also potentially has access to external methodologies, often generates some form of impact in the sense that I just recalling experience of one of my closest collaborators who is a member of the Messianic community, and she discovered during her research that as being recognized as a researcher, collaborating with an academic institution, even while positioning herself as an EMIC researcher, she started to be excluded from certain groups because especially like the youth, because it's okay, you are going to research us. We don't want to be researched by you, right? Even if you're a community member, they trust her. Obviously, they trust her. So this creates certain different dynamics in the community. And the second comment is that I think we also tend to, as academics often objectify languages in the sense that they treat them as solid objects. We objectify communities as also homogeneous bodies, and this is never true. They are very heterogeneous. There are internal power struggles and divisions, and we are sometimes, when we ask for ethical permissions, okay, we get some representation of the community to give us the consent. But this is also kind of like cheating ourselves in the sense that how can we be sure this is really representative of the community, and if the whole community approves of it, or maybe our research excludes some groups within the community that are more they are internally excluded because we rely on our relationships. So the research in this sense, even if we rely on the community collaborators, we might be still doing harm to the community. So what's the voice of the community? Who can yeah, so all of these challenges, and I think this is like something that's really crucial for good practices. There is no easy solution to this, but being like constantly aware of it, I think it's a real challenge.
Can I say? This is just something that I completely agree with, but we have to be aware of the limitations, of course. And when you're researching a community of how many people, I mean, how many people can you interview? How many people can you be, observing across time? So those are the limitations of the research. But I would be a little bit mindful of thinking of binaries also, because we know, of external research, internal research.
Exactly.
Sometimes, the lines are a little bit more blurred, in the case of Viviana here, who has been, working with the NASA people for years and years and years and years. Is she external to the community? Yeah, she is. But is she internal to the community? She's also internal to the community. What I wouldn't like to think of those binaries of out, in and out, because we cannot afford that, in those processes that we're looking at. We need alliances, and the more alliances, the better. Of course, as long as we carry out, we undertake, field work, etc., and research in ethical ways, and of course we can discuss that later. Not the limitations. Oh yeah, of course. Yes, yeah, of course. Yeah, it has to be from the
I want
community.
to make time for other questions, and they don't have much time, so we'll move on to one final question.
Buenas tardes. Primero me voy a presentar y luego hacer plantear una breve duda que tengo yo. ¿Sí? Bueno, ¿me escucha ahora? Mi nombre es Antonio Barreña. Soy un vasco de comunidad. He vivido con bastante intensidad el proceso de revitalización de mi pueblo, como se pueden imaginar. También soy lingüista y últimamente, últimos 16, 17 años, colaboro con una ONG vasca que se llama Garavide, que hace revitalización lingüística. Y aunque en Garavide hay una serie de principios básicos, que es que nosotros lo que de una forma decimos o expresamos es que la experiencia vasca no es un modelo a imitar, sino que como mucho es un referente a tener en cuenta, ¿no? El pueblo tiene que construir su propio camino, su propio proceso de revitalización de la lengua y la cultura. Segundo, que nosotros lo que pretendemos es compartir experiencias y crear puentes entre distintos pueblos para colaboración. Pero ahora planteo mi duda. Yo he colaborado, sobre todo con los NASA, pero he colaborado también en otros procesos de revitalización y muchas veces me suelo plantear una duda personal. La duda personal es hasta qué punto no estaremos haciendo neocolonialismo del verbo, con una forma nueva de neocolonialismo. Yo no sé si esa es solamente una duda que tengo yo o si es una duda que se la ha planteado alguien más en esta sala. Y a mí, de alguna forma, sí que me ayudaría una respuesta, porque yo de verdad más de una vez en el vuelo de vuelta a casa he dicho, esto está terminando. No lo sé cómo decir, ¿no? Pero de verdad es lo que siento y no sé si alguien me puede decir si se ha planteado alguna de estas dudas. Se lo gracias.
I have thought about it. There are whole books written on the academy as a colonial archive. Like if we're doing research, we're collecting knowledge for the colonial archive. Yeah, that's part of what we do for the academy. So that's why positionality and the project aims are so important. And the other work that comes out of it is so important. And trust is so important. And also, leaving things out might be important too. I don't know. Yeah.
I have no doubt that I'm colonial. Like if I haven't recognized this, I wouldn't be able to really think about how I can decolonize some and then learn something I've been taught. It's like you have to think about what elements of coloniality you really perpetuate in order to be able to really question them. I think it's the necessary step. And sometimes you are not even aware of it. So I think there's no decolonizing the mind without the recognition about pervasive forms of colonialism that we are part of. So I'm not saying that everybody should recognize, should identify like this, but for me it's like it hurts, but I think it is as it is.
Thank you very much for this question. I had similar thoughts, especially when conducting fieldwork. And for me, what is the most difficult part to accept is that we sometimes build a relationship over years, but we have some goal in mind, so for some value to create. But I think what differs today, what makes us different from the past, is that we want to create this value also to be shared with the persons that we speak to, that we collect data from. So I think this cross-cut of personal relations and carrying out research is something that probably is the most difficult part. And I think we really have to be careful in this area to to make benefit everyone from the research. Thank you.
I just want to make a brief comment. Solo que quiero recomendar que, o quiero decir que los lingüistas filipinos de las universidades de Manila, sobre todo, han estado reflexionando sobre esto últimamente y han escrito algunos artículos, han hecho un volumen y creo que, bueno, que también es un sitio, ¿no? En donde había, bueno, en un congreso participé en un workshop, pero solo para oír, ¿no? Y empaparme de ideas sobre cómo decolonializar la lingüística en las Filipinas. O sea que creo que hay ideas de las que empaparse. Gracias.
Gracias. Muchas gracias a todos. Thank you, everyone. We will hopefully continue this dialogue, but for the remaining 40 minutes of this session, we'd like to shift course slightly to talk about one particular piece of academic bureaucracy that is often quite colonial, but it's also something that we try to work with and try to use to achieve better outcomes, and that is research guidelines and ethical guidelines. So the panelists ahead of time were asked to take a look at two particular guidelines. One is the Trust Code, which is developed in collaboration between European and non-European researchers, and the other is the Foster-Lang Ethical Code, which is a working document that has been developed as the project is getting started. And I'm going to pass around now copies of these documents. So there's two different documents here. And what I'd like to do in the remaining time, we started late and we have completely talked through the break, but what I would like to do is just briefly launch this discussion about the role of guidelines in research ethics and research partnerships with the help of our panel members. And then we'll break into discussion groups where you can go with a group of others outside, if you like, in the courtyard, or you can stay here. And in each group, there will be a note taker. And then this is a way that we would be very grateful to have your input and your expertise on this topic. And we will stop in a few moments. We'll stop the Zoom. First, we have a small discussion. Let me really, yeah. Okay, if you prefer a digital version rather than the handout, you can access the documents here. And this one is in both English and Español, Castellano. If you access it there, you can scroll down to la versión en español. Está también ahí con ese código. So the reason that we are bringing this topic to the table is because this is something that Foster-Lang has promised to do. Foster-Lang has said that we will develop the Trust Code in a way that is useful for research with minoritized languages. And in order to achieve that, we would greatly appreciate your input and your thoughts. Okay. So I imagine that many of you are aware that there are different frameworks for research with both minoritized communities and indigenous communities. You've probably heard of the 4 R's: respect, relevance, reciprocity, and responsibility, for example. The Trust Code, as you'll see in the handout, uses fairness, respect, care, and honesty. And in the Foster-Lang Ethical Code, there's a structure that follows the general research activities. And of course, there are many other frameworks that you might be familiar with and would be very interested to hear about them. And as I've said, we are bringing this topic to the table because it's something that Foster-Lang has committed to discuss and to work on. So I'd like to ask the panelists to briefly give their thoughts on what kind of guidelines they think are important for researchers who work with marginalized communities in various ways. Are there certain guidelines that you've worked with that you admire? And so the floor is open to the panelists. Yes, yes. So
should we say something now?
that is the invitation. Yes. If you have something you would like to say,
So
you're very welcome to say it.
I would like to invite you to think about this aspect I was also talking about. So equitable research partnership. So issues of co-authorship, but not really fake tokenized co-authorship. I think this is a real challenge, how to change it into good practices. And I can tell you, I was telling about my frustrations, not just frustrations, also anger about how local collaborators are treated. So I've heard so many times from researchers that, okay, we can put them in acknowledgements, or, you know, maybe it's enough because they were remunerated for their contribution. But so were the researchers, right? But they don't have theoretical input. Can you imagine this? So you basically work with communities, you work with local people, but then when it comes to publishing, they are considered as not contributing theoretically. So I think that the good practices and awareness of good practices should really sort of revolutionize this approach, because this is totally groundless approach rooted in academic prejudice, but it's so common. Maybe not so much in anthropology anymore, but in psychology, for example, especially sociology, especially quantitative approaches or model building, right? So my ideal, I'd say, dream about good practices is really to operationalize this knowledge production equity and how this is reflected in actual academic output. And I say this is a real challenge. And the Trust Code talks about this equitable research partnership and acknowledging the role of local researchers and contributors. But this is so easily manipulated. This is so easily tokenized. This is reduced to acknowledgements, to some minor roles and so on. So it's really not working well, I think.
So first of all, I'd like to say that in general, I find the Trust Code already quite a very solid, good document. I found some issues that I think could be improved. So for example, the multilingual versions of materials. So I think this point is not there, but if we work with minoritized communities, we should aim for producing the data, for generating the data and materials in multilingual forms, or at least in one language that is known to this community. For example, if we lack funding, for example, because I'm talking about practicalities, if we lack funding for translation in several languages that the community speaks, at least in one. And another things that I wanted to comment on, they refer to practical implementation of these rules. So, for example, the researchers are responsible for seeking consent in the communities. So I think this is a phase of research that is usually not included in grant applications, in projects, and I think it prolongs the project implementation, and also it requires a set of groups within the research team. So I think this is also something that has to be more highlighted in exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, and what I fully agree with Asha. So it's actually should happen that you have ethical, some kind of pre-screening and some kind of consent from the community before you even apply for funding. So when the project idea emerges, you discuss it, and only then you write it down and you go like more formal about it. I think this is very often overlooked, and I think none of the official ethical procedures really requires this to be done like this.
And I,
If I just may finish and just two things that I also understand that there's lots of responsibilities on the researchers, and that's correct. But I also understand that everyone from us is a bit different, and some people might have problems with establishing connections before the project, or to seek the consent of the whole community. So I think that there should be at least some links in these guidelines with the recommendations for people who start their research or who are maybe more introvert, how to actually establish this kind of relations, because everyone is different and not everyone is as skilled socially to do these things. So I think we should give a hand also to different neurotypical features of people who carry out research. Thank you. Yes.
I would just like to add on and stress this point. Since I try to make a point in my talk that what is important with grant writing is that you actually establish these relations beforehand, and this is stressed in both of the guidelines. This is really, and I think this is a really good point worth making. And to emphasize this, I have a little story of what usually happens to at least to insider researchers. I'm not sure if it happens to outsider researcher, but I work in Sweden and Norway, which are colonial settings. Most researchers that in any field relating to Sami are outsiders, and these bodies that give the grants usually don't look. There are exceptions, but in my experience, this is often overlooked. So research groups get the grant, and all of a sudden they have a grant and haven't thought about, oh, how do we ground this in the research? Do we have a colleague at this university? And that makes at least in my experience as an insider researcher, you are approached the way that communities complain about being approached, because and now all of a sudden this is a colleague approaching, so you actually do have some kind of a collegial responsibility to share contacts or to help. So you find yourself in a little bit of a pressured position. So to sum up, I think that it's really important that this is stressed in the trust codes and other kinds of the other versions of these kinds of documents that do get more and more common. I think, at least in my context, I see more like indigenous NGOs developing these kinds of guidelines where they stress this point. So I think that this is a really important development, but we're still not there, because these stories tend to play out every now and then.
Yeah, just something very quick, but just my first reading again. I joined academia very late. I come from actually working with LinguaPax for many years, and then joined academia, having done field work, of course, and and filling out all the forms that my university requires in terms of ethics and consents when conducting field work in Mexico. But still, I see all these documents like one-sided. This is one side. This is from universities in the West, in the Western world. This is how we see. I still sense here subjects, meaning equals us as researchers, and objects in a way. And what really struck me is that whenever possible, which is almost like you see whenever possible, it wasn't possible. So you say Article 4, local researchers should be included, and then wherever possible. I mean, are we talking really about partnerships, equal partnerships? Then they have to be included. They must be included. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, it's just, okay, this is for us, meaning Western universities working everywhere to kind of, yeah, we're doing the right thing. You know, we following ethical. Yes, exactly. I mean, it is quite advanced, you know, but still, I don't see. I see it as as one-sided. This is how we think about the work that we're going to do with indigenous communities, rather than joint thinking. You know, joint. You know, yeah. So that's one of the things I wanted to say.
No, if it's a follow-up, go on. But I think that when it comes to ethics, especially, academia forces us to treat speakers either as authors or as data points. And then if you are right, you have to de-anonymize, you have these data protection issues, and then otherwise you have the option of including authors. As you said, this is also a challenge, but we haven't explored the middle ground between being a de-anonymized data point and an author of a paper. And then some speakers do want recognition for the recordings that they, so I had issues with the ethics committees or with other archives saying, I don't want to de-anonymize this speaker for this recording because this is his version of this story. And I think there are many options that we haven't explored yet that are not either acknowledgements or de-anonymized speakers and authorships. So when we communicate with researchers and we want to add one of their comments in a paper, we do write their names and add personal communication. And we don't do that always when we do elicitation. So we have, I don't know, I don't know what the solution is, but I think there are also other options to explore. Yeah.
I have two thoughts. First one is that sometimes, so it happened to me. So we tried to discuss the possible project with the community, and the community seems like indifferent. Like say, okay, like almost like saying, okay, if you think it's good, just do it. And it's just, we shouldn't stop there. I mean, something is wrong, right? So it's basically that we haven't talked enough or discussed what it implies enough. Maybe the relationship is not good yet enough to go for it. So this should also alert us that this shouldn't be like this kind of superficial concerns. And sometimes we think, oh, maybe they are not interested. Maybe they don't have time. And none of these are good excuses, I think. And then about anonymization and pseudonymization. So there was this rule in our university, I'm just saying this as an anecdote, that you can pay contributors of research without going through all the tax paperwork if they are fully anonymized, but then they have to sign. And if they are just pseudonymized, so you collect their emails, then you cannot pay them, because this is not full anonymization. So, I mean, who even invents this kind of, just crazy, yeah. And we have to struggle against all of this rules. Sometimes we can do something about it, and sometimes we have to go underground, right? Yeah.
Thing to say. Thanks. Something that I liked on there in the trust code was around capacity building and around guidance around the natural environment. I think that that's something that we sometimes think of the environment as like the context in which all the language work happens, but actually it's entangled with the language all the time. And I think it would be great to see more attention to the natural environment, the physical environment, extraction of resources. Are you tromping around? Are you marching around on plants? Or are you, I don't know. And the other thing I would just say is that I was trained to do research by an Ojibwe woman. And so I'm very much influenced by Indigenous thought traditions from Turtle Island. And I think a lot about the ethic of reciprocity that is embedded in those thought traditions. And I also think this ethic of reciprocity that is like core to a lot of Indigenous ontologies and epistemologies is entirely absent from the way universities tend to think about ethics. Like we tend to treat ethics at the university as more of like legality rather than ethics, first of all. And then when we do talk about ethics, it is kind of this like one-sided thing that you're talking about, Joseph. So, I mean, as someone who reviews a lot of ethics applications, I would really love to see like a field on the ethics application or a way to submit some sort of statement, like a mandatory field where the applicant has to explain how the research demonstrates mutual care and responsibility with relevance to the local community as like a core ethical principle.
They often have this benefits sharing. There's often this benefits sharing, but the benefits sharing is not reciprocity. No, no.
One more. Can I have one more? Well, I had one other thing. I was also thinking, this has just come up in my own university, that there are a lot of community organizations that want to do their own research. They don't want to always have to partner with like the neo-colonial like researcher. They want to do their own stuff. And it would be great if the universities could find ways to support local communities, either through training or having maybe like ad hoc like ethics advisory partnerships or something. And my own university doesn't do anything like that, but I'll raise it in the next meetings. I think it would be great to see.
So one of the ideas I had in the past, but I haven't been able to implement it. Maybe we can, well, I hope we can still do it, is to have indigenous or minority ethic panels, independent of academic bodies.
Yeah.
We wanted, we still should like take steps to implement, because there's a lot of organizational work, but our center wanted to provide like a platform from this, but none of this as like academics would be on it, but just provide a space for experts from communities to be ethic panel members for all the research that has to do with their communities in this area. I mean, in the country. So. And then obviously there would be no way to oblige universities or funding agencies to consider this, at least in the first stage, to consider this as something necessary in their approval. But if it really worked, then I think researchers would also be more mindful and like trying to take this into account. So it could be transformative, I think. Maybe.
This is just a side comment that I believe that every time we start working with a community, we should really ask the members first if they have some experience with researchers before, and what were these researchers, what do they focus on, are they actually tired of working with researchers, and do they believe whether the researchers can still help them in any way. So at some point I started asking these questions in my interviews, and I heard many heartbreaking stories, also maybe funny stories. Also, communities are very well aware what the researchers are particularly interested in which specific features of a given community. And so I think that in general, I think these are the questions that we always have to ask before as external researchers.
Thank you.